All right, guys, so we have the Arnold Classic coming up, and it's looking like a really, really competitive show. And I thought, what a good opportunity to do a bit of a prediction slash analysis breakdown video of who I think is going to win. What I want to do is go through the front pose, place the top 5 based on the front pose only, and then go through the rear pose, place the top 5 based on the rear pose only, and then do like a bit of a total tally thing to give my overall top 5. The unfortunate part is I can't do the rear pose on Instagram. So if you like what I'm talking about here and you want to watch the rest of the video, go over to YouTube. We'll put the link somewhere on my Instagram and watch the rest of this video. But yeah, I hope you enjoy, guys, and let's get stuck into it. So basically, we don't have Laura Lee or Ash. So based on placings alone, I've got Jasmine coming in first based on the front pose. You know, and it's not just because of placings either. It's just because of her trajectory. It's because of her structure. I believe she's superior in her structure. You know, she's up against Maureen and Amy, who are like absolutely like insane in the front pose as well. But I believe if she comes in just a tad fuller, and I believe that was her feedback for the Olympia, but if she comes in a tad fuller, she's going to be unbeatable in that pose. You know, you can see that here. Her silhouette is flawless. She's got just enough width through the lats, just enough cap on the shoulders. You know, the balance in her physique compared to, you know, Maureen and Amy, it's, you know, Maureen and Amy are like next level, but Jasmine's balance, it kind of makes them look not as good as they are. It's kind of, you know, that's what my eyes tell me. It's an insane physique in that front pose on Jasmine. So I'm giving her first based on those things. I mean, is it possible that she doesn't win? You know, obviously you got to win front and back pose as well, and we'll go through that in a sec. But based on just the way she looks in this photo, her placings last year, you know, trajectory, and just what I think her potential is, I think she would be a top, you know, contender for that front pose there. I've got then Amy in second, and this is just due to her like experience, her consistency. I think that she was a little bit full, like a little bit soft at the Olympia. So I feel like if she came in a little bit tighter, I'd be interested to know whether she could maintain that same level of fullness, just a little bit more conditioned. Not too much though. You know, obviously you want to maintain that fullness. So I have her in second just based on that. I think she's, you know, extremely hard to beat, and I wouldn't be surprised if she comes in next level for the Arnolds. Maureen, I believe she's a much stronger bodybuilder in the rear pose. You know, I think that she's the level of conditioning that she gets to can hold her back to some degree, but at the same time, she brings that crazy fullness. She's got a crazy structure, and you know, her overall look is something you can't ignore. So I've actually got her in third, I believe. Yep. And then I've got Ashlyn over here in fourth, and then Venia in fifth. The issue with Venia is that she's lacking a little bit of width. I don't know if that's because of her pose in this current photo, but it makes her look a little bit bottom heavy. And I also see a little bit too much definition and separation on her back quad there. You know, a little bit too much calf. Like, these are the things that catch my eye, and it just doesn't look as sort of balanced to me when I first look at it. It takes a little bit of time to kind of see what I'm looking for, and that's something you want to avoid in bikini. You don't want to have to figure out what it is you're looking at. You just want to like look at it and go, wow, that's awesome. And that's the vibe I get from Jasmine. You know, her front pose is flawless. It's the posing itself, but also the way her body is put together, the development of her glutes. You know, there's just enough fullness. I think that she could be a little bit fuller, but like I said, if she brings that in, she's going to be very, very hard to beat in that front pose. And then I've got Ashlyn. You know, she's sort of gives me the same vibe as Jazz. I would say a little bit too muscular in the arms, a little bit too sort of like X-framey. But I feel like if she was a little bit fuller, a little bit more density, then that would disappear. Also possibly a little bit sort of narrow in the back leg here. It just kind of takes it away from the balance. And something I wanted to mention is these girls, like Venia, Ashlyn, and Maureen, they have their back shoulder covered with hair. This throws off the balance a little bit. You know, you can see compared to Jazz and Amy here, these girls that have their shoulder covered with hair, it's hard to see the balance. It's hard to see the hourglass shape. So obviously, that's not always the case. It's not the hair's not sitting there every single time, but it's something that does play into the judging. So I'd be interested to see if they fix that in their posing. But it's something that does just catch your eye, and you can't see the shoulder, you can't see the balance, you can't see that they're structurally as perfect as Jasmine and Amy here in the front pose. So that's probably my prediction for top 5 in the front pose. You've obviously got some crazy competitors here like Maria, Angelica, Jordan, Ariana, Tamikia, and Anastasia is the only one that wasn't an Olympian. I think she came like 11th or 10th at the Mexico Pro Show. She's got a really good structure as well. She reminds me a little bit of Vania. I would say she's just got a little bit too much quads. And, obviously we haven't seen her on an Olympia stage, so it's hard to know what she's going to look like. This lighting is all Olympia lighting, so it's hard to know what she's going to look like in that same lighting. So she could be a wild card, we don't know. Let's see what happens. But these girls outside the top 5 that I've given here, there's a little bit something missing in terms of fullness, development, or balance in each of them. You can see the glute fullness on Ariana here. Angelica is just a little bit too sort of flat in the legs. Jordan, it could be a posing issue, but she's very, very lean and lacking a bit of fullness. And so it gives it that sort of almost too much X-frame look about it. Like it doesn't just sit balanced in my eyes. So she could do with it being a bit more full and maybe just a tweak to her posing. And that's the thing with bikini. You don't want to have to look anywhere in particular. Everything needs to be perfect. You don't want to have to your eyes don't want to go and rest somewhere. That you just kind of want to dance around the athlete and just be appreciating the aesthetics. And that's how you've nailed it. And then with Tamika here, there's like a little bit too much quad definition, So, that's my top 5 for the front pose. We'll move on to the back pose and see what we end up with. So, for the back pose, obviously different placings. This is where, obviously the judges don't judge just one pose. And this is where MAUREEN really just shoots ahead. I have her in first for the back pose. It's such a superior pose. The level of fullness, there's not too much tie-in. There's not too much definition or etched in hamstrings or anything like that. You can see her shoulders clearly. Her hair's covering her back. It's all the way down. Like, it's just completely boxed off. And it's one of the best back shots in the IFBB, in my opinion. Absolutely insane. Like, the crazy glute development, nice and full, balanced hamstrings, quads, and glutes. Like, it's all just like, it's perfect. In my opinion, that's one of the craziest back shots. So that's who I've got for first in the rear pose. And then who else have I got? I've got Amy in second. Amy's the same thing. I think for me, the only issue is when you stand next to MAUREEN, it does make you look flat. Like, everyone just looks flat compared to MAUREEN in that back pose there. So she's got to make sure that she brings a little bit more condition. Then, like, she was a little bit soft in the front pose. So she's got to make sure she's going to bring us a little bit more condition, but also the fullness. So coming in a little bit harder and then filling up from that better conditioning, rather than sort of staying softer and then hoping that looks nice and full. It's like you got to get the conditioning underneath and then fill back up to sort of match that sort of that crazy hyper carved up look that MAUREEN has. Whether that's a genetic thing or whether it's just their strategy, who knows? But that's something that is going to be very difficult for most of these girls to sort of compete against in the rear pose. So Amy in second. Amy's very balanced as well. She does have obviously a little bit of her shoulders covered with hair here, so it's hard to see in comparison to MAUREEN, but she is very balanced top to bottom as well. And then in third, I've got Vania. So she has a really, really strong back pose. The problem for me is that her glutes look a little square. But in terms of her like overall conditioning, fullness, it's next level. So, that's why I've got her in third. I feel like if Jasmine was a little bit fuller, maybe a little bit more development, I don't know how much she would have developed her glutes since the Olympia, but if she was a little bit fuller and rounder, like MAUREEN, then she's not getting beaten by Vania there. The only reason I've got Venia beating Jasmine in the rear pose is because of the level of fullness and development, and I think that would be hard for the judges to ignore in that position. You know, the other issue I have with Jasmine here is her shoulders are covered with hair, and that can make it hard to judge the balance. You know, it's just hiding a lot of what you want to see there. Like if you compare her to Maureen here, you can see that's just really nicely equal top to bottom. Whereas with Jazz, you know she's balanced, but you can't quite see it. And there's a little bit of lower back showing as well, so it does tend to be a little bit distracting. So depends on the judge, of course, but at the same time, there's just little things that add up, and when you aren't as full as you need to be, the glutes don't have the same impact, and your eyes start wandering around, and you start sort of looking at other things, and that's something that you do like really quick. You know, judges will do that subconsciously, and they'll pick something, and they just won't have her in first, and so then she'll fall down the lineup, and someone like Venia will come in with that fullness and just take that level, right? Take that step, take that place. So. Yeah, Maureen first, Amy second, Vania third, Jasmine fourth, and then I've got Ashlyn here in fifth. Ashlyn's crazy. Like, her structure's crazy. She's like a mini Jazz, like I said before, for the front pose, but she's just lacking development here. She's lacking fullness. She's lacking development. You know, I also don't like the fact that the hair's not covering the whole lower back here. So just little things like that. You know, like I said, for Vania, it's the same thing. There's just little things that distract you. You're sort of trying to figure out what you're looking at. And then when the glutes aren't overly developed or full, you just tend to look for other things to kind of like, you know, that aren't where they need to be. So for her, if she was fuller and rounder and you know, fixed up a little of these things with the hair and stuff, she'd be placing a lot higher. But I have her in fifth for the rear pose. So yeah, outside the top five, you know, obviously you want to mention Maria again. We've got Angelica, Jordan, Ariana, Tamikia, and Anastasia. You know, there's some really crazy rear poses here. Like Angelica's rear pose, you can't ignore that. I feel like she's a little bit bottom heavy, not as wide through the upper body. Same with Jordan. She's got the width there in the upper body, but the shoulders need to be a little bit more capped off. And all of these girls outside of the top five for me really just lack either development or fullness in the glutes. You know, especially with Tamika here, like great shape, good conditioning, but it just not round enough or full enough to take your eyes away from any of the muscles. So it's not sort of like where it needs to be. If you compare her to like Maureen, it has that wow factor, but it also isn't balanced with the rest of the body. So it's a combination of the condition with the fullness and the balance and the wow factor that makes them, you know, place higher. And it's something that a lot of these girls just need to get the development up, bring the fullness with the conditioning, and they'll be placing a lot higher. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens though on show day. Yeah, I'm really, really excited for it. So that being said, we've got a tally here. So based on the rear pose, the front pose and the rear pose placings, I've tallied it up and I've got a total for each one. And that gives us a winner, first place for Amy, gives us a second place for Maureen, a third place for Jazz, a fourth place for Vania, and a fifth place for Ashlyn. Now, it's interesting because obviously, you know, I kept talking about Jasmine a lot. I think she could come in fuller, bigger, you know, like just more polished, I guess, and she could easily win it. Like any of these top five really, probably besides Ashlyn, I'm not sure like how much she's done since that show, but really I any of these top five, honestly, if they come in fuller and just more polished, like if Maureen comes in just exactly like this, you know, it's anyone's game. It's bikini. So, you know, it's obviously going to be open to whoever nails it on the day. And, you know, everyone's got their strengths and weaknesses, but it's going to come down to a battle of weaknesses. Like who's got the least number of weaknesses and who's able to present themselves with that, you know, perfect bikini criteria, conditioning and posing. And it's going to be really interesting to see. So that's my top five predictions for the Arnold Classic 2025. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. Who have you got winning? Who have you got coming second, third, and fourth and fifth? And or if you don't agree with the placings, or if you've got anyone outside the top five, out of my top five placing higher than that, let me know in the comments, and let's start a discussion. Cheers, guys. See you in the next one.